was 3 years old, November cold. Mama washing clothes, then the world broke loose. Radio crying, mama on her knees. Kennedy gone, I didn't know what it meant, but I knew what grief looked like. My sister just born, life starting new. My brother shook nights no one could undo. They called him limited, you called it done. I told him I'd make him well someday. I meant every word I said, but promises don't stop time, and love don't always win the fight. Still somehow through the losses and breaks, I'm still standing when it counts. I've carried a weight you couldn't see long before it ever showed on me. From a boy who hoped to a man who tried to fix the world from the inside. I've fallen hard, I've stood back up. I've lost a lot, but I'm still here enough, and I wear that belt to remind myself where I've been and why I live. I grew up heavy inside and out, books and coats that never quite fit right. Dreamed of healing, studied hard, white coat, wedding ring, a borrowed star. Family medicine, years on call, fixing lives while mine grew small. Then the years stacked up like unpaid bills, pain pills, scans, and take these stills. Diabetes, strokes, numb one side, cane in my hand, a chair inside, 320 on the scale, back cut open, still hurting, still hoping. I'd healed everyone but me. I was running out of time to see. I've carried a weight you couldn't see long before it ever showed on me. From a doctor's sworn to a body break, and still believing I wasn't done yet. I've fallen hard, I've stood back up. I've lost a lot, but I'm still here enough, and I wear that belt to remind myself where I've been. Telling stories just like mine. First the veggies gone, then the doubt held on. Eating butter, salt, and thyme. Crazy way they all said so, but the pain let it go. One quiet day at a time. No insulin, no heartburn flames, no bottom lines, no constant pain. Blood runs calm, the fog lifts clear. I feel like I did 40 years. I carried a weight you couldn't see, but it don't own a damn thing now. And me, I walk upright, I stand my ground. I'm not the man they counted out. I've fallen hard, I've stood back up. I've lost a lot, but I've healed enough, and I wear that belt wrapped round my back to remember hell and never go back. It's not shame I carry, it's proof I survive, and I plan to live long enough to watch my grandson's life.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Kiltz Health live stream with Dr. Nelson. I am your host, Dr. Nelson, and I am coming to you from Central Florida. Please let me know where you're watching from. And I saw Cheryl was here. Bacon Runner from Maine. Sandy, how are you doing? Coach Angela Mullins. Lainey, how are you doing? And George. After the time change, now you can watch this, I think. Cam's dad. CB, welcome, welcome. Bright Biscuit, Brian Ari, Leon, Lisa from Wales. I am going to the United Kingdom in June. And if you don't know why, my good friend there, George Goodenough, can tell you what we're doing. I have no idea how close or far from Wales we're going to be. All righty. So we had a guest. The guest has not arrived yet. So I will entertain any questions you may have. Let me know what you want to talk about. And if any of you want to come up here and talk to me a little bit about your story of healing, I'll be happy to do that with you. And yes, it's Somerset. It'll be my first time in the UK. Actually, except for some cruises and my honeymoon in the next door island of Dominican Republic, I haven't been outside the United States. I mean, I have crossed the border up to Canada and back, but I didn't need a passport for that. All right. I am going to post the link. So I'm inviting anyone who wants to come up and talk to me to do that. And I see a couple of people there in Instagram. We're transmitting in multiple channels, Facebook, YouTube, X, Instagram. And I just put the link in the chat if anyone wants to come and talk. Maybe George, you want to talk about a little bit about the United Kingdom meetup that you're planning? You're welcome to do that. Please let me know if you like the intro. Was a song that created by Grandma Crochet Corner, Barbara, who has a very, very good story of healing. For those that do not know, this back here is part of my story from, I don't know exactly. Well, we have our guest here, so I'm going to bring him up. And hello, Dr. Evan. We are live.
Hey there, apologies. I apologize for the delay. I had the wrong link.
That's okay. When you're live, those things happen and you just have to continue. So welcome. I did have a little bit of info beforehand, so I'm going to read it now. Dr. Evan Hirsch is known as the Energy MD. Today, we're diving deep into the science of energy. Many in our community find ancestral human nutrition helps their stamina. But what happens when you're still exhausted? Joining us is the Energy MD himself, Dr. Evan Hirsch, to reveal the toxic 5 sabotaging your health and how his 4-step method can finally resolve chronic fatigue. Welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me on.
All right. Now, most of the people watching are either carnivores, carnivore curious, low carb, high fat eaters. Do you follow any particular way of eating yourself?
Absolutely. And I believe that it's really more about what you don't eat than what you do eat. So I recommend a paleo diet. That's generally what I consume. It's high on animal protein and vegetables and low on grains and sugars and alcohol and processed foods.
Okay. So go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us about this program, this protocol that you have to get rid of fatigue. Fatigue is probably the number one complaint that doctors get.
Right.
When we're dealing with a specific, fatigue. What is fatigue? It's a vague symptom, and it could be many things for different people. So we can talk about that as well.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
I think that's a good place to start. So, fatigue is generally, there's acute fatigue and there's chronic fatigue. And so acute fatigue is when you exert yourself and you're tired and you rest and you get better. So, if you ran a couple of miles and then you're tired that day, maybe a little bit the next day, but then the day after that, you are back to baseline. Chronic fatigue happens when you have a tiredness that's not relieved by rest. So you're resting 7 to 9 hours a night or longer. You've been resting for a number of days, and consequently, you don't have your right energy. You're surviving your days on caffeine. Maybe it's energy drinks, maybe it's coffee, maybe it's tea. Your energy is crashing throughout the day, so you don't feel like you have good energy throughout the day. And maybe you need naps, like I did when I had my chronic fatigue, where I had to nap underneath my desk every single day. And I felt so much shame about it. I had to close my office door because I was practicing functional medicine. I could help a lot of people, but I couldn't help myself not have to nap every day. So that's acute versus chronic fatigue. And then you want me to go kind of like into my protocol and like what I've learned and stuff like that?
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So, my story was...
And if anybody has any questions along the way, please put QQQ in the chat and put your questions in there for Dr. Evan here. Okay.
Yeah, happy to answer any
Go ahead.
questions you have. Yeah, so my whole philosophy, I came out of conventional medicine, I went into functional medicine. I still couldn't get all the people better that I wanted to, who had long COVID and chronic fatigue syndrome. So those are the people that I really specialize in. And so then I had to go into environmental medicine, where I learned about heavy metals and chemicals and molds and infections. And then I had to learn about nervous system dysfunction and trauma. And what I really found was when people have an energy issue, they're not making the energy that they need to and they want, you can definitely replace your deficiencies. You can optimize your lifestyle habits, get enough sleep, drink enough water, improve your diet, get enough movement. You can take vitamins and minerals and hormones, etc. But there's a segment of the population that you do all that for, and they're still not better. And this is where you have to address what I call the toxic 5. And this is a combination of the heavy metals, the chemicals, the molds, the infections, and the nervous system dysfunction that has built up in our bodies over time that end up being the real root causes of our symptoms. Our bodies cannot function well when you're FOS, when you're full of stuff, when you've got these toxins and the infections that are compromising your ability to make energy, your immune system's function, and then also your nervous system dysfunction as well. So we've got a 4-step process that we take people through that we found to be most successful. But I think that's probably the most important thing to start off with, is that the toxic 5, if you haven't addressed the toxic 5 and you're tired and you feel like you've addressed everything, you have not addressed everything, in my experience. I've never met anybody who has addressed the toxic 5 and hasn't gotten better from their fatigue. All
right. So we do have, obviously, we have this diagnosis we've had for a while, chronic fatigue, and it has sort of gone up and down in how frequently it's mentioned. It's always, I've been a physician for 41 years. It's always been there, and there are a couple of things that have been blamed, but not everybody has it. For example, a viral infection like Epstein-Barr virus, right? But not everybody that has chronic fatigue has Epstein-Barr virus. Let's go through the 5 a little bit and tell me how each one of those may be causing the fatigue. Because they're definitely not good for you, and they can definitely cause multiple things. But the fatigue, how do they each one contribute to it?
So it's never one cause, so in conventional medicine, where we think a lot about the, Occam's razor and what's the one cause that could be causing this particular issue or that's contributing to the diagnosis. What could the potential one cause of that diagnosis be? And that doesn't work for fatigue, chronic fatigue syndrome, or long COVID. The reality is that it's always a combination. Sometimes there's a trigger where, with long COVID, you get COVID and then you get these persistent symptoms that don't go away, whether it's hard time, you lost your smell and your taste, or whether or not you have fatigue or brain fog or body pain or sleep issues, etc. If those symptoms persist after a viral illness since 2020, it's very likely that you have long COVID. But when you can't really get some of these infections that persist without having some of these toxins present. So the immune system's whole job is to get rid of things out of the body that aren't supposed to be there. So generally, when you're exposed to a virus, any kind of infection, the immune system goes after it, tries to wall it up, and then get rid of it out of the body, right? When you have heavy metals, chemicals, molds, and other infections in your body, the immune system is going to be compromised, and then it can't do the job that's needed to do. Okay, so when you say that not everybody has Epstein-Barr virus who has chronic fatigue syndrome, I would definitely agree to a point. The reality is that the people that I see who have chronic fatigue syndrome, they have Epstein-Barr virus, they have cytomegalovirus, they have HHV6, they have Lyme disease, the Lyme co-infections, they have parasites, they have a number of different kinds of heavy metals, number of different kinds of molds and mycotoxins, number of different kinds of chemicals. And all of those things have kind of built up in the body until the body has called it quits, until the body says, you know what, I need to rest now. It's called the cell danger response, where the cells in the body are not going to make any more, the mitochondria are not going to make the energy that they need to make because they're calling it quits because there's too much crap in the body. And for people who are thinking, you know what, I don't think I have heavy metals or chemicals or molds or infections, the studies show that when we're born, we have over 300 different chemicals found in our bodies, in babies' bodies. Okay, so that's found in babies' cord blood through the placenta. Okay, so we all have these toxins and infections. It's just a question of how much builds up in the body, what are the stressors, what are the triggers, and then what's the straw that breaks the camel's back. Like I mentioned, for some people it's COVID. For other people, it could be mono or getting Epstein-Barr virus. And for other people, it's moving into a moldy home, right? And other people, it's having a divorce or some sort of psychological or emotional stressor. So those become the triggers for the stage that's already been set by the Toxic 5.
Okay. So walk us through the Energy MD method. What are the steps? What do you normally do with people with that complaint?
Yeah, so the first step is to determine the causes that an individual has. So this is going through a process of people filling out an intake form. I assess it, and then I provide them with a plan in 7 business days. So it used to be where you had to wait 3 to 6 months to see me. Now I've been able to figure out how to make it a lot shorter so that we can get people in as fast as possible. So that's the first step, is we're looking at over 30 plus different causes, and we want to make sure that we don't miss anything. If you miss a cause, you're not going to get all the way better. So my goal is to address all of the causes that you have, and 99% of all the causes that are known. Because the reality is, and you guys all know this because you've been to see your conventional doctor probably if you've got fatigue, the reality is that all blood tests are imperfect. Dr. Nelson could probably tell you this as well. So the reality is that it doesn't always give us the picture of what's really happening in your body. And so, in medical school, this is one of the things that I learned that is actually accurate when I went to conventional medical school, is that 90% of a diagnosis really comes from history and symptoms, and then 10% comes from physical exam and laboratory tests. And that the more that I do this work for the last decade, the longer I do this work for, the less I test. And that's because I've seen these patterns before, and I want to make sure that when someone joins my program, that we are going to address all of their causes, both those that have shown up on laboratory tests and those that haven't, because I know that that is the best use of their time, energy, and their money in order to be able to get them to the finish line. When you're addressing 99% of the causes, you're just, your likelihood of success is that much higher. So that's the first thing, is determining the causes. The second thing is that we start off by replacing the deficiencies. So vitamins and minerals, hormones, mitochondria, lifestyle habits, getting enough of all of these things is really going to optimize the body, decrease inflammation, removing the gluten and the grains and all that sort of stuff, the sugars. That really makes such a big difference for people, right? Oftentimes for people in my community, it'll take them from an energy of about a 3 out of 10, where 10 is ideal energy, to a 4 or even a 5 out of 10, just by replacing those deficiencies. But, long story short, this process is all about step 4 and removing the toxic 5, but we have to prepare the body for it. We have to make the body more resilient, decrease inflammation best we can, ramp up on adrenal support and thyroid support and sex hormone support if that's something that's particular to that individual. So that's step 2. Then in step 3, we want to open up the exit pathways. These are the pathways that you use to get crap out of the body. And so this is opening up the liver and the kidney and the lymph and the neurolymph and the gallbladder and the intestines and all of those pathways, so that when we start pulling the toxic 5 out of the tissues in the body, they have a place to go. Because for people who've done detoxes before, or removed heavy metals or chemicals or molds or infections, and you felt worse, it's because you didn't do step 3 properly. You didn't open up those exit pathways so that when you start to pull those toxins and infections out in step 4, they have a place to go and they can actually get out of your body.
Do you use electromagnetic fields? Pulse
We
electromagnetic field machines, or?
So we don't use pulsed electromagnetic fields, but we do want to make sure that people are not being inappropriately exposed to Wi-Fi and mobile data, because all of those things will make things worse. A lot of people don't know that if you have mold in your body and you are exposed to mobile data or Wi-Fi or some sort of electromagnetic field, you will feel worse. You will get, that activation of the mycotoxins, of those mold toxins, will increase in your body and will increase inflammation and will make you feel worse. Were you referring to the pulsed EMF?
So let me tell you why I asked the question.
Yeah.
About a year before this picture here, one of the things that happened to me was a stroke. It was a mild to moderate stroke. I was using a walker to be able to ambulate because it was difficult to do it. I could do it, but I was going to fall if I tried for too much. About 3 weeks after my stroke, someone came to my house to show me a pulse electromagnetic field machine. And after I had my first session, I stood up, single session, 60 minutes, and I walked without the walker. I never used a walker again.
Amazing.
It was that powerful. Now, it didn't cure me right then and there, but I definitely used that machine from that moment on in my recovery because it helped tremendously. I mean, we're talking and I have videos to prove it how I was. I was eating with the wrong hand because I'm right-handed. It was my right side that was weak, and I was walking with a walker. And this particular machine, we're not here to sell the machine, so I'm not mentioning the brand, but it helped me. It definitely helped me. So I continued using it for years. This was it's going to be 8 years later this year. So that's why I mentioned. And then in doing the research and trying to come up with questions, my AI suggested a question with pulse electromagnetic field. So that is the reason I'm asking. But part of using that machine is also sort of warding off the and the protocols is warding off those bad electromagnetic fields.
Hmm.
The Wi-Fi, the phone, all these things. So, what do you do as far what is the advice to the patients as far as avoiding these things? Because we're in modern life, right? You use the phone, you ride a car, you live in a house. I learned about the certain toxins that even the earth had when we built the house almost 40 years ago, and the builder was telling me about radon. So, but what is your advice regarding those things, the radiation, the electromagnetic fields that are bad for us?
Yeah, well, and I want to address the pulse DMF first. So I know that it can be very helpful for a lot of people. It does increase blood flow at the capillary level, decreases inflammation, all of that. The challenge that the people in my community have who have long COVID and chronic fatigue syndrome and chronic fatigue is that it usually makes them worse. And part of that is because you are increasing blood flow, and in part you're moving heavy metals and chemicals and molds and infections around the body in ways that you don't necessarily want to. So in my program, I operate online as a health coach, and everything that we do is natural, and we're using lots of herbs and lots of tinctures. And so we're increasing by a drop at a time when we're going after each of these toxins and these infections, so that we have a lot of control over how people are feeling. If they feel worse, if they're having what's called a die-off reaction or a Herxheimer reaction, we know because they just increase the dose of one thing by one drop, and we can manage it appropriately. I was just seeing people with the pulse DMF have really strong die-off reactions that it was setting them back months. And so I no longer recommend it, but in certain cases, especially with somebody who's had a stroke, et cetera, it can be very helpful. Yeah. And then to answer your second question around how to avoid
Yeah,
EMFs, it's very hard to avoid. It's really about doing the best that you can, understanding, how to mitigate your exposure. If you can avoid Wi-Fi and you can wire your home for Ethernet, do that. Everybody can put their Wi-Fi or their modem on a timer, like a light timer, and mine goes off at 11 p.m. and then it comes on at 5 or 6 a.m. And so you're not sleeping with Wi-Fi being exposed to you. If you have a smart meter on your home and it's right outside your bedroom and you're wondering why you're having a hard time sleeping, if you can contact your city and change your smart meter to an analog meter, it might cost you a little bit more, but oftentimes that can make a huge difference for people. And then when you go to bed, make sure that you're turning off your Bluetooth and your Wi-Fi and your mobile data on your phone. Put it in airplane mode so that you don't have ongoing exposures. You can have cases that you can put on your phone. You can have cases that you can put on your laptop, that you can put under your laptop to pull the Wi-Fi and the electromagnetic fields out. There's capacitors you can put into your outlets to decrease your dirty electricity that's kind of coming into your house. So there's a number of things that you can do. It's very hard to avoid things entirely, but you can definitely feel empowered, and you can definitely make a difference in your life by making some of these small changes.
We might not be able to avoid things 100%, but certainly doing many of all those things that you mentioned decreases things significantly.
Right.
You know, in wherever there is electricity, you have transformers somewhere, right?
Right.
You don't know how far it's going to be from the house that you're going to end up living, but you're exposed to all these things all the time. All right, so we have some questions. Let's bring up
Great.
some questions from the audience. Pregnancy safe cosmetics. Um, okay, so do you say you don't test? You mean traditional blood tests, but you don't test for heavy metals,
Great
etc.?
question. So in terms of blood testing, I do want to see an iron level. I'd like to see thyroid, TSH, free T4, free T3. I'd like to see a B12 level, CBC, CMP. Those are all generally ones that you'll get from your conventional doctor. And those can be helpful for determining things that are harder to determine based on people's symptoms. When people come to see me, I want to make sure that they're going to get all the way better. So I do not test anymore for heavy metals and chemicals and molds and infections. We just treat all of them, because the reality is that I've been fooled way too many times by imperfect laboratory tests. So if you're doing a urine test for heavy metals or for chemicals or for molds, you're basically doing an excretion test. You're testing how well you excrete, because these are urine tests. If you do not excrete well, which most of the people who have these conditions do not, then you are not going to show up with molds in your urine or mycotoxins or heavy metals in your urine. And then consequently, you're not going to treat them. And if you don't treat them, you won't get better. Because the question is not if you have these toxins and infections in your body. The question is, how much of each do you have? And I'm going to know more by taking you through a process where we're increasing by those tinctures, where if you feel worse when we're increasing the tincture that addresses heavy metals and chemicals, and we have to slow things down and go more slowly and increase your step 3 support, that tells me more about your total body burden of heavy metals and chemicals than any imperfect laboratory test will.
All right. And this asking the question is Afshan, and she deals a lot with toxins as well. All right, let's get our next question here, which is also from her. What tests do you use? Vibrant body, parasite test, O test, GMAP. And I think you answered partly, at least, with the previous question, that you're not doing any specific test, but if you can address this.
Yeah, I just wanted to address, I basically answered it in the previous response, but the reality is that I've been fooled way too many times. I don't use these tests anymore. It's going to be better, in terms of a GI map test or the parasite test, the likelihood of finding a parasite on those is about 1%. And it's just better to go ahead and address parasites. In terms of yeast, maybe it's about 10%. In terms of the bacteria that's going to be on there, in terms of Lyme and Lyme co-infections, it's very hard to find these to be positive on a lot of these tests. And these people have these causes, have these infections based on their symptoms, and they still need to be addressed.
All right. Brian Ari, I am trying to help my brain. What is the best way I can fix my brain? My brain fog, forgetful, concentration. I had COVID-19. I almost died. I need help.
Yeah, I'm so sorry that you had that. We've had, COVID-19 has just been a blight. Addressing the spike protein, which we do in the program, we're going to use antivirals, we're going to use nicotine therapy, we're going to use things that stimulate acetylcholine, we're going to use vagus nerve stimulators, nervous system retraining. All of these things are going to be very helpful, but it really is the total body picture. You do have to address the toxic 5, the heavy metals, the chemicals, the molds, the infections, including the spike protein, and then also do the nervous system retraining. And we find that wonderful things happen. We have a ton of testimonials for people who've gone through our program who've had your same symptoms, but it requires going through a 12-month process of addressing all of the toxic 5.
All right. And I have here a website that's is this the best place for people to come find you and learn about this?
I would actually send them to our quiz, the fixable fatigue quiz. So, this is a short quiz to determine whether or not your fatigue is fixable. And you can get here through myfatiguescore.com. That's MYFATIGUE score.com. And you'll be able to get a percentage of how fixable your fatigue is. And then you'll be directed to our free masterclass, which you'll see here. It's the first menu option at the top. Or if you click on Learn How, that's going to take you to our, there you go, you found it. Nice job. Yeah. So the myfatiguescore.com will take you to this assessment. It's just a couple of questions, and then you'll be prompted to go to the masterclass and learn more about our philosophy. And then if you want to get on a free call with me to see if we're a good fit to work together, you can apply for that as well. We don't accept everybody onto that call. You have to fill out a form in order to qualify. And then on that call, I'll tell you whether or not I think that we're a good fit to work together. About 30% of the time, I tell people we're not a good fit. So, we're looking for people who are really ready to make a change, who are committed, who understand that this is going to be a 12-month process, who understand that you have to address all the toxic 5, because we don't want to work with anybody who we don't believe that we can get all the way better. It's just not the best use of your time, of our time.
All right. And I put the address in the chat. So that's where you go. All right. Oh, I already addressed this one. How do you open those exit pathways? This is Lisa Sherry Beaumont.
Hey, Lisa. So everything that we're using we use a lot of tinctures because it gives us a lot of control. I'm using tinctures that are specifically going to open up those pathways. So there can be milk thistle. We're going to be supporting the liver with things like berber and panela. There's other herbs, dandelion, they're really helpful for the gallbladder. There's also some certain processes that we have, or practices that we have people use, like lymph massage. You can do your own self-lymph massage. That can be incredibly beneficial. Drinking enough water is huge. So, 2 to 3 liters of water a day, especially up towards the 3 liters when you're going through a detoxification like we're talking about here. Removing or optimizing your diet by removing the crap, the sugars, leaning more towards the paleo and the carnivore like you guys are all talking about. That's a wonderful way for opening up the exit pathways as well. So you kind of have to come at it from a number of different aspects, but it's definitely time well spent to make sure that you're going to be prepared for removing the toxic 5.
So essentially, your method is a holistic approach to trying to improve and deal with all the 5 things that you have identified.
Absolutely. Yeah, my belief and my understanding and my experience is that if we address all of the causes that we know of in the literature, we are going to be successful. And it actually takes less time, energy, and money to just treat all those things than to try to test, wait a couple months, etc. The body gives us the clues if we actually know what we're looking for.
All right. Pregnancy Safe Cosmetics asks, do you deal with a lot of MCAS, mast cell activation syndrome?
So this is one of the things where I'll tell somebody on a call that I don't think that we're a good fit to work together if they have a lot of sensitivities, especially to supplements, alcohol-based tinctures, herbs, etc. So we do have people, everybody who goes into is in our program has some degree of sensitivities, whether it's to foods or allergens. But when somebody has MCAS, I recommend that they join a nervous system retraining program, whether it is the Gupta program or Primal Trust or DNRS, and do that for 3 to 6 months, and then come back to our program, because that is the biggest bang for the buck that I have found. It's generally about $97 to $100 a month for those programs, and you can do them for 3 to 6 months. Do all the practices. You can also get like a vagus nerve stimulator. I really like the Neuropod device or the Apollo Neuro. And those can be incredibly helpful and give people a really significant improvement, so that then they are going to be more successful when they go through our program. But it takes a lot more time to try to navigate when somebody has MCAS or mast cell activation, for those who aren't familiar, and you are more sensitive. We'll have, the nice thing about the tinctures is that we can put them on the hand and rub them in. And so people who are sensitive, we can kind of work around that a little bit. But I've also just learned it's better just to have them focus on doing the nervous system or the limbic system retraining with one of these programs, then come back to us in 3 or 6 months, and they're going to be just much more successful in the program.
All right. And she had a couple of other related questions, which you just happened to answer, so I'm not going to bring them up. But how does an ancestral human diet, an animal-based diet, complement your energy method?
So it's really important to make sure that we're not consuming things that are going to increase inflammation in the body and suppress the immune system. And that's exactly what happens when you consume sugars, when you consume grains. So focus really on meat and vegetable is where it's at. And so, for some people, it's and fat too. So, we want protein, we want fat, and we want carbs, but just carbs in the form of vegetables. So that helps to detoxify, that decreases inflammation. It plays a very important role. Now, for people who are really tired and they can't change their diet, sometimes we have to come back to that later. Sometimes we have to go through the process and remove a significant amount of the toxins and infections out of their body, so that they can have more energy, and then they can actually participate in the preparation of their food. And then that's really where they can have more benefit.
Can't change their diets or won't change their diets?
Well, with the people that I work with, some of them can't get out of bed. And so it's more of a, they would love to, they know that they need to change their diet. But if they have a partner who is amenable and who is understanding, who can help and prepare, that's great. If they can, purchase meals that come in through the mail, that can be really helpful for them. But we have a lot of compassion for people in our program who are struggling. And so we really want to meet them where they're at and help them along the path. And, we don't push them into things that they aren't necessarily ready for, but we do say, you're not going to be able to get all the way better until you do this.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been focused on fatigue for the last decade.
Okay.
I had my chronic fatigue from 2010 to 2015. I wrote my book in 2017. And then I've been practicing medicine since 2004.
Okay. So many carnivores have energy spikes, and then sometimes their energy dips down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could this be because of one of the toxic five at play?
Absolutely. I mean, it really depends, but you're saying so that people who have good energy, sometimes they crash even if they're on a carnivore diet. So the carnivore diet helps them, but doesn't help them get rid of all their crashes?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, there are obviously the blood sugar crashes, but there are also the hormonal crashes. So the reality is that the adrenal gland is supposed to produce cortisol, which is our main get up and go. It's our main anti-inflammatory. It's supposed to start being produced at midnight. It peaks at 6 a.m. and then it comes down throughout the rest of the day until midnight. It manages stress in the body. And whether that's mental, emotional stress or physical stressors, like the heavy metals, chemicals, molds, infections that build up in the body over time, it is going to be compromised. And when your adrenals are compromised, then your thyroid is compromised, you get autoimmunity, your sex hormones are compromised, you have low libido, low testosterone, your menopause is worse, or you go into premature menopause. So it really is this cascade, and at root, so much of this is the toxic 5.
How much gut permeability relate to the toxic 5?
Yeah, so you cannot have the toxic 5 without having gut permeability or leaky gut. You cannot have long COVID, chronic fatigue syndrome without having leaky gut. And the reality is that 90% of the people on the planet have leaky gut. Like when you have toxins, they damage the lining of the intestines. When you have infections, they damage the lining of the intestines. When you're not consuming the right foods, or the foods that you are consuming have pesticides in them, insecticides, glyphosate, etc., all of those things are going to damage the lining of the intestines. You're going to get gaps in between the desmosomes, and things can leak through, and you get inflammation in the GALT, the gut-associated lymphoid tissue, which is where you have the most amount of the immune system in the body. So yeah, I would say that everybody that we work with has leaky gut, and leaky gut improves as you remove the toxic 5 out of your body. It really allows the body, everybody's talking about how you have to allow the body to heal, and I absolutely agree. But I do believe that you have to remove the toxic 5 and fix the nervous system in order to allow the body to heal. You can't just wish it.
Do you find that oxalates, lectins, and all these plant defense chemicals that are every plant, even the ones that we eat and we may consider healthy, they all have anti-nutrients and toxins that are their defense chemicals. So, through history, people have found that if you ferment or cook certain, some of those, you decrease them. And there are other things that it doesn't matter what you do to the food, you still have them.
Right.
But do you find that they play a role in this toxicity?
So I believe that the reason why people are sensitive to certain foods is because of the toxic 5. So the more toxins and infections that you have in your body, the more the immune system is going to be reactive to your foods. And so I absolutely agree that those things can be harder to digest. There's also lots of benefits with vegetables as well. So, it's kind of like push-pull with, everybody is an individual, and everybody has to experiment to determine like how well do you consume, or how well do you digest meat, vegetables, grains. There are some people who have to consume certain things that we don't necessarily think that are appropriate, or that we have questions about, like vegetables, having these lectins and these defense mechanisms. So I do wonder whether sometimes when people are reacting to them, is it because of the defense mechanisms, or is it because there are things that are triggering the immune system, like the toxic 5, that are causing the immune system to attack certain foods that are coming into the gut that are increasing inflammation. And that meat potentially is more neutral to the immune system, especially if it's high quality and it's grass-fed, than some of these vegetables. It's also very possible that if the vegetables are not organic, that you are reacting to them because they have glyphosate or pesticides on them. So sometimes it's hard to know why people are reacting to certain vegetables, but yeah, it's definitely something to consider.
All right. Afshan asked, could you put those nervous system retraining programs in the chat? If you're asking me or him or someone in the chat, I don't know. She did have another question. What about people with Parkinson's that are really, really tired? Do you have anything to say about that, and what in relation to what you're talking about?
Yeah, and I just put, it doesn't look like I have access to the YouTube chat, but I just put those into the studio chat if you're able to copy those in, Nelson.
Okay.
Those are the nervous system retraining programs that I recommend. We also have a nervous system retraining component in our program as well. And so we do have a mindset and then breath work and a number of things like that. But I also want to make sure that people are getting, our program is not cheap. And so I want to make sure that, you can go ahead and do this other program, get benefits, and then join our program for the biggest bang for the buck. And then in terms of Parkinson's, when people are really tired, so I do not specialize in Parkinson's, but my understanding is that and based on the research, is that the toxic 5 does play a significant role. I had a friend who came to me recently and said, hey, I just got a new diagnosis of Parkinson's. How can your protocol help me? And I went and I did some research, and I found that there is correlation with each of these different components. So I looked at the heavy metals and the chemicals and the molds and the infections, Lyme disease, parasites, etc. And all of those have been shown in the research to either trigger Parkinson's or make Parkinson's worse or be associated with Parkinson's. So the question it's all about where in the body the toxic 5 are manifesting. So if they are affecting the brain, you can have Alzheimer's, you can have Parkinson's. If they're affecting the muscles, you can get some sort of autoimmunity to the muscles. If they're in the thyroid, you can get autoimmunity to the thyroid. If they're in the skin, you can get autoimmunity to the skin or lupus. So it really just depends. If it's damaging the mitochondria, which makes 70 to 90% of our energy, you will get fatigue. So there are people who have Parkinson's who don't have fatigue. And that's because the toxic 5 are affecting their substantia nigra in the brain, but are not affecting the mitochondria. So that's one way to look at it. And it's the same thing with long COVID. Like, why do some people have muscle cramps and brain fog, and other people have fatigue and loss of smell and taste? It just depends on where the spike protein goes in the body.
They're going through this program. You say it usually takes 12 months. I believe that's what you said, right?
At least.
I guess on the average. People, when they're detoxifying, sometimes they have detox reactions. How do you deal with those when they're clearing these toxins?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so those detox reactions are what are also called die-off reactions or Herxheimer reactions. And that's what step 3 is for. So we're opening up those exit pathways to decrease the chance of having those die-off reactions. But then it doesn't mitigate things entirely. But then we do what I call the die-off dance. And this is as we're ramping up on the tinctures. Let's use that example again with the heavy metals. If we're increasing a tincture that's pulling out heavy metals and chemicals and you start to feel worse, we pivot back into step 3. We increase some of the die-off support, and then we can pivot back into step 4, and we can keep increasing those tinctures, probably at a slower rate. But it's that die-off dance because everybody's an individual. Everybody's going to be detoxifying at a certain rate. We want you to detoxify at a rate that your body can tolerate. If you detoxify too fast, it will be stressful on your body. You will get more deficiencies in your hormones and your vitamins and minerals. You will feel worse. And I can't tell you how many people tell me that they, hit something with an antibiotic or a really strong antimicrobial. They did not do any step 3 support or any preparation for having any sort of die-off, and they were set back weeks to months. We do not do that in our program. We make sure that we are able to control the environment best we can. And that's why it takes 12 months, because you're going to be detoxifying at a rate that your body can tolerate so that you can continue to function, work if you need to work, but that you're not all of a sudden now you're in bed and you cannot function in your daily life. That's not going to help you. And the body really likes small changes. You're not going to get there faster by hitting something harder. Part of the spiritual journey of getting better is realizing that slow and steady wins the race. The body likes small changes. Doing the nervous system retraining work and loving yourself is incredibly important. Living in gratitude is incredibly important. So it's all these small things that you probably thought was hooey when you first heard about it, when you didn't have fatigue. But now that you have fatigue, all of a sudden you realize, oh crap, now I have to do these things in order to be able to get better.
Well, definitely gratitude and forgiveness are very important.
Absolutely.
And sometimes we're hurting ourselves by trying to project, or not even trying, by projecting hate towards others. And it's similar to drinking a poison, expecting the other person to get sick.
Yeah.
Um,
Agreed.
are there any specific supplements that are non-negotiable for mitochondrial repair?
Non-negotiable. I mean, we have people who sometimes react to different supplements. Some of the ingredients we are going to be like acetyl L-carnitine, um, D-ribose, CoQ10. But there are definitely people in our program who have preferences over one or the other. If I recommend a product and somebody reacts negatively to it, we switch them to another product. We want, part of step 2 in replacing those deficiencies in mitochondria and thyroid and adrenals, et cetera, is that we want good enough. You do not have to be perfect going through our program. You do not have to be perfect as a human on this earth. You still deserve love. I digress. But replacing the step 2 deficiencies is important, but we do not want to get caught up in which mitochondrial support you're taking when the biggest bang for the buck is getting into step 4 and removing the toxic 5. It's going to take 6 to 12 months for moving through that process of removing the toxins and infections out of your body. And the sooner you start that, the sooner you get better. So, the magic in our program really happens around month 9 when you have removed a significant amount of the toxic 5. And people are like, oh my gosh, that's so long to get better. But you have to think about, how long have you been sick? How much money have you spent? How much time have you lost? What has your quality of life been? What's another 12 months in order to be able to get your life back? People are typically 60 to 100% better at 12 months. And if they're 60% better, then it usually takes them, another 6 to 12 months to get all the way better. So it's just a matter of time when you're addressing all the toxic 5.
So we're almost at the top of the hour, and we have to finish before the clock hits 60 minutes. 2 comments. One is a message to my friend George here, because George's last name is Good Enough. So you don't have to be perfect. You just have to be good enough. That's why you said, right?
Amen.
All right. So one last time, where should they go to find you? And you suggested
My
that you go
fatigue.
to
Yeah, myfatiguescore.com. So myfatiguescore.com, myfatiguescore.com.
and you can start your journey there if you so choose. Okay. All righty. So for those that are not members of the Kiltz Mighty Tribe, become a member. It's free. You can find, just search for Kiltz Mighty Tribe or Dr. Kiltz, or any of our websites, or if you do a search for Kiltz Mighty Tribe, you will find it. We do have a Zoom call at 5:30. So in an hour and a half, I'll be with you there in the Zoom call. I believe we have a guest today in addition to me. So we'll be talking to another doctor, as a matter of fact. And Dr. Hirsch, thank you very much for being here with us today. Okay.
Thanks so much for having me on. Nice to meet you all.
All right. So have a good day, everyone. Eat meat.